Well, the Democratic Alliance says its local government elections manifesto would be a blueprint for how it would govern should it win more councils in this year's local government elections. The party's leader, John Steenhuisen, says the biggest failures in local government are in small municipalities, which they will focus on. To unpack the party's manifesto, then, we're joined by UJ Politics and International Relations Professor Siphamandla Zondi. Prof, a very good afternoon to you. Grateful for your time on Newsfeed PM. So the DA, like many other parties in this election, says it'll fight corruption, it'll deliver basic services on time. But if everyone is saying that, what makes their promise unique?
Good afternoon. The DA is a political party, and its reason for its existence is to pursue a political vision it has. And as part of that, it is under obligation to sell itself. And where does it sell itself? What does it use to sell itself except to look at a positive side of its governing record in Cape Town, and try and illuminate it and expand it and even exaggerate it for purpose of saying that it can rule better. Because the DA's at least minimal goal must be to do better than the ANC, which is an easier thing to deal with. But in the process, it must also claim that it is excellent, which is something very different. It can do better than the ANC in certain things, but it may not be an excellent part. But it has to sell it that way, because political campaigning is a form of political advertising, political communication, selling yourself, and in selling yourself, you exaggerate the positives.
And John Steenhuisen was saying today that the DA governs less than 10% of the country's municipalities. They've been in charge in the Western Cape and in Cape Town for, a decade now. They often reference that as the key viewpoint if you want to assess their success in government. Why have they not been able then to replicate their growth much faster if Cape Town is such a successful blueprint?
Yes, we often forget that the Western Cape is not a typical region of South Africa. It is very specific, the specific conditions, it's got its own particularities. And therefore the experience of the DA rising into power in the Western Cape may not be easily replicated in other parts of the world, in the parts of the country. It was able to get into power in Johannesburg via a coalition, as it did when it first got into Cape Town, which means the attrition of votes from the ANC was a gain for the DA in the Western Cape as it is in Johannesburg. But the Western Cape had other dynamics, including the issues of identity, that could enable the DA, racial identity, the DA to establish itself a lot stronger there. It is debatable whether it has established itself there because of its performance, or it is established itself because it is not the ANC, not necessarily in performance, in identity. And that is what the DA could do. But it couldn't use its successes in terms of political strategy in the Western Cape to win elsewhere. So it needed to do something else. And I think that is what Maimane was trying to do. Reach out to the black vote. Project yourself as a party that can understand their interests, and the working class party, and reach out, go launch your manifesto in Archerville and do that. That is what he was trying to do. But the DA itself could not fully embrace that, which is what it has now done, to pull back from that approach, which then leaves us in a situation where it might never really make inroads elsewhere. It must simply just grow little support here and there and try and cobble up a coalition. But it's unlikely to grow as well as it could have done had the Maimane strategy been maintained.
And just on that strategy, that is often, or we've seen it to some extent at least, as well in the local government elections, be it when Patricia de Lille was being put forward to run the city of Cape Town, and then in Johannesburg in 2016 with the surprise partnering up, or the membership of Herman Mashaba, who then became a DA member, a DA mayor of the Metro via the coalition. This year, we're not seeing as much of a focus on a particular superstar mayoral candidate, if you will. Is that the right strategy?
I think they have abandoned the superstar, I like the way you put it, the superstar strategy, because it doesn't really work. If you come to think about it, there are millions of South Africans that are on Twitter, and they make decisions on the basis of quite superficial things of image and stuff like that. And that's millions of people. And I know there are people who think that because politics is a science, then you must win it on the basis of the soundness of your argument and the bigness of ideas. You will win a particular portion of people on the basis of the soundness of ideas. But you need to have the razzmatazz, the flamboyance of the Maimane period that was able to draw in such flamboyant figures as De Lille. De Lille is a flamboyant figure that's got an image, it's recognizable. Herman Mashaba, who was just brought in, and a few others who were brought in that way. What they've now done, it seems to me, is that it is a lot of white faces, sadly, which doesn't help them reach out beyond the ceiling they've reached with a white vote. The second thing is they look at efficient others, people who are unknown elsewhere, like the candidate for Johannesburg, really very little known elsewhere, but he's an efficient person, but not a person with an image, with a branding. Now, if we don't do that, and the party does not have a great branding in these other communities, what is going to compensate for that lack of charisma? It's a big challenge that they're going to face, because even the president, the leader of the party doesn't have charisma. He's an intelligent person, is quite efficient, he knows his stuff, and I think he's a good strategist and stuff, but he lacks charisma. In politics, charisma is almost everything, especially for our communities, especially for the middle class, especially for the youth vote, which you need to win.
So do you think the DA, for example, in Johannesburg will have a tougher time this year because Herman Mashaba is now on his own with Action SA? You've got the DA, has got Palati, Dr. Palati standing. The ANC sadly lost its mayoral candidate, Jolly D. Matongo, as we know, a week ago. And now here we are. It's hard to tell, isn't it, who has the upper hand at this stage?
Yes, both the ANC and the DA will have a tough time in this particular case. But what would save the ANC is that it has a brand that appeals to communities that are bigger in number and low class people. So even without a person with the charisma of the brand and how they know how to do that game and have rallies that are powerful and get musicians and all that, they might be able to compensate for that. But the DA, I don't know what they're going to use to compensate for this. Because the DA leader for Gauteng, Solim Simang, is also a very professional person, a very efficient person, but not a charisma person. So where will that charisma go? So the DA has actually shot itself in the foot by losing Mashaba, who had charisma provincially, and then losing Maimane, who had charisma as well. You know that. Now, they lost both of them at the same time, and without a clear strategy about how they would replace that charisma. Instead, get negative charisma, such as in Madame Zille, who is very well known, is followed by a large number of people that offends them. Instead of being followed by a large number of people and endear himself to them. So one will have to watch and see what is their political strategy, and especially political communication strategy, that will compensate for the lack of charisma in the individuals that it is building its campaigns about. But I can see that it is focused on the middle class, the savvy, the professional, who can understand the list of issues. South Africans don't always vote on the list of issues. They sometimes vote with their heart, and they kind of feel you. You need to reach out to them, to reach out to their hearts.
Professor Siphamandla Zondi from UJ, good to speak to you, sir. Thank you.